So we're really excited to bring Representative Fine and Senator Rucker today because both of them have been in the fight specifically for school choice and parents' rights broadly, y'all. But we are going to focus a bit on school choice during this panel. So what we have here are two individuals from two different states with two different programs who have both listened very carefully and come at it from a perspective of parents and empowering them. So we brought these people in because we talked to you about the levels. It's your school board, it's the state board of education, it's your congressional delegation, but your state reps have enormous power. And here we have two champions who volunteered time to come and talk to you about, honestly, how you can convince other people and some of the things that matter in the State House. So thank you both for being here. And we are going to go ahead and dive right into some talk about school choice. And I'll start with one question specific to each of you. So Representative Fine, Florida represents one of the nation's largest choice programs in that it services a huge number of students, and that was not always the case. So can you briefly talk us through how you went from not having very many choice options to serving tons and tons of students in Florida, and how that happened and what's the next step?
Sure, and thank you for having me. Sorry, a little loud. I'm pretty loud without a microphone, so thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to start by telling a quick story about why I care about this, and then I'll answer the question. I always think of two 13-year-old boys. One 13-year-old boy, he was in 7th grade, he was a Jewish boy, he was the only kid that went to his school, and he got beat up every day by other non-Jewish boys, chased him and broke his bones, hurt him very badly, and it wasn't safe for this Jewish boy to eat in the cafeteria with the other kids. He had to use the bathroom in the principal's bathroom. And he had great parents, but they didn't have a lot of money. And so he said, Mom and Dad, get me out of this school, let me go somewhere where I'll be safe. And his parents just couldn't do it, so he had to tough it out. And he did, and he toughed it out, got into a great college, went and started businesses, did very well. Second 13-year-old Jewish boy, also the only Jewish child at his school, never got beat up, but one day had some kids come up to him and say, we wish Hitler had gotten the job done. And they started texting him using technology, doing the Nazi salute, sending him swastikas and things like that. But his parents had money. And the day he told his parents about this, his parents yanked him out of that school and put him in a different school. The first 13-year-old was me. The second 13-year-old was my son. And you should not have to be wealthy in order to protect your child, which is why I work on these things every day. So in Florida, lots of this happened before I got there. I've been in the legislature since 2016. So many of these good things happened before me, but we started with charter schools, public charter schools, saying, look, they're public schools, but giving people choice. And that movement began to move. And then we've said, well, we'll offer tax credit scholarships. We're not going to take the state budget. We're going to let people make donations, like corporations make donations, and use that for two things, for scholarships for children with special needs, and we did more, fortunately, than just autism, all sorts of special needs, and then also income-based scholarships. And what we've done over time is we've expanded them and expanded them and expanded them. So 2 years ago, I ran the largest expansion of school choice in American history. It has to do with the number of children that we have in Florida, because we're a big state. So today in the state of Florida, if you make $100,000 a year or less, and you're a family of 4, you can get a voucher to send your kid to any school you want in the state. It's not just low income anymore. We're now covering 91% of children in the state of Florida. And now if you have a child with special needs, but you make more than $100,000 a year, and you want your children to all go to the same school, you can get vouchers for those children as well. So we've created cross purposes. But then we've also, this year, we expanded it again. We said, hey, if you're in law enforcement, we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for keeping us safe. If you don't want to send your child to a government-run school, you can do that as well. So that where we're going from here is I would like, and I hope to run. I've been doing education for my entirety in the legislature. I'd like to run the final school choice bill. It's not too dissimilar from what they've done in West Virginia, the final school choice bill, which is every dollar, every student, every modality. To make it very simple, we don't care what you make. And today in Florida, we don't give you all of your money. We give you the state education dollars. We don't give you the local education dollars. It's about 70-30. So you would get every dollar every student and every modality. Today, unless you're special needs, we exclude homeschooling. So, and that has been a huge growth in our state and all of the states over the last several years. You homeschool your kid, you're on your own. Even if you qualify under income for a voucher, you cannot use that for homeschooling. So every student, every dollar, every modality, I think you will see that do it next year. And that'll be more kids than go to most schools, most states in the country.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to turn it over to Senator Rucker, and I think most people are certainly generally aware that West Virginia recently did pass the gold standard as far as process and availability for students as a school choice program. But what some people don't know is the fight that you had over years to get there and how we got to a gold standard in a state like West Virginia. So can you walk us through that a little bit so that hopefully it serves as inspiration, but also a model for success in other places?
Okay, I will do my best, and thank you very much for having me here. And I just want to let everyone know that I was a FreedomWorks trainee way back. I started in the Tea Party movement in 2009, and very grateful to now come full circle.
And she didn't have this beautiful office. She told me that when we were upstairs. She's like, the office wasn't this nice when I was here.
Definitely wasn't. And I do have to give acknowledgement to Florida, Arizona, Indiana, and all of the states that have paved the way for any and all of these school choice, Ohio too. So when I became, and by the way, I got elected in 2016 and been serving since then. When I became, yes. When I became education chair, my caucus basically said, Patricia, we want to bring West Virginia, up to par with other states. And at that point, there was all of this school choice that had been occurring for years and years in other states, and West Virginia had zero. Absolutely nothing. And it also has been known as a state that was pretty much controlled by the unions, and has been. So that very first year as education chair, I took them on, and I tried to pass a education choice omnibus bill. And boy, do they love that. And I'm sure you guys heard of that little teacher strike that started in West Virginia and then went to other states. So I'm very happy to say I was the cause of not one, but two teacher strikes in the state of West Virginia. But it failed, and it failed miserably. It was actually quite funny. Like the 18 senators who wanted education choice and hung together, we passed that education omnibus bill not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. 4 times we passed it. And the House and the governor just killed it. At the end, the teachers still wanted to get the pay raise that had been promised to them. And we said, well, sorry, we tried. We passed it 4 times in that education omnibus bill, and you all killed it. So too bad, we're not going to do it. Every single leader in the House and the governor were doing everything they could to bribe, to cajole, to threaten one of the 18, because it only took one stepping away from that position, and the whole thing falls. And not a single one would cave. So at the end, we ended up basically telling the governor, who was saying, what do I have to do to give the teachers this pay raise? Call a special session, pass an education reform bill, even if it's not the same. So we ended up passing something, but it was very, very minor, and it did not include ESAs at all, which was our #1 goal. So when that happened, I can tell you the unions were like, oh, we won. It's like, yeah, maybe you won this small battle. But I actually promised them in a statewide radio program when I was interviewed that you better get me out, because if I get reelected, you're going to regret not passing that small ESA, because next one is going to be a lot better. So they did everything they could, spending $2.4 million against this one Senate seat that, we get paid $20,000 a year, just so you know. And they failed. And I got reelected. And I got reelected by good numbers. So everyone in the state knew what would happen. And this time, I was much better prepared. I got the grassroots motivated and involved early. I had met with small groups and educated them about what ESAs were. I reached out to coalition partners to help get them involved. And we actually, we were organized. Until that year, the private schools in the state of West Virginia had never organized or worked together. I challenged them, you guys need to create an association so that it's not just teachers associations in the state of West Virginia coming to lobby us. We need private schools, and we need parents, and we need all these groups organized. This was all done way before the session began. And then the bill that I drafted, I followed the best practices from the existing ESAs programs that, other states had passed. But I had always looked at those ESAs that Florida, Indiana, Arizona had, and always, I will tell you just from the bottom of my heart, hated that it's only for this income. It's only if you live in this region. It's only if you're special needs. It's only whatever. It didn't matter. To me, it's like, if you say that we need to pass this for kids who are not doing well in school, what does it matter? What does it matter where they live, or what special needs they have, or what income their parents have? That has nothing to do with the student. If your focus is the student, then how dare you say we're only going to provide that help for this category and not for the rest? And so this second ESA, I was just absolutely determined, unrelenting. It's going to be for everyone. We're not going to put those qualifiers. And there was pressure to do that, as it happens. It'd be so much easier to pass if we just did this. And the public schools are so scared of losing all their money, we should limit it to some number. And it's like, no, because you're telling me that there's one child who's going to be lost out because of that limit. And we just held strong to that and finally got it through.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is there have been some recent studies with Jay Richards and Ed Choice over there have both looked at all of the school choice bills that we've passed, and they found two things to be in common, and I hope you'll connect this to what they just said. The first of which being that regardless of how big the program was, the Democrats all said, it's going to be the end of education. You're going to destroy public schools, whether it's 0.001% of the budget or it's 2% of the budget, which is not 2%. They say you're going to destroy the public schools. Any program, any size, they all said that. And then the second thing that they said was that in most cases, it did not require all of this bipartisan support. Out of most of the laws that we've passed in the country, it was just getting your side to vote with you and electing people who will vote for that. So it wasn't about creating programs that will get bipartisan support. Now, I understand that is true in some states, but that was not at all the trend. And both of them said, you said, I'm going all for it, and you better not reelect me. And you said that's the next step in Florida. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. And so that's really inspiring to hear. And so let's start talking about what we hear about this issue and how we can be good advocates. So the next question I want is, what are some of the most interesting myths? Because you've both talked a little bit about what are some good messaging in your introductions even, but what are some of the most interesting myths that you hear, or even better, myths that your colleagues believed about school choice in the legislatures?
Well, I'm lucky. We've had this so long that we actually do have a fair amount of bipartisan support in Florida. In fact, and I also have another advantage. I have Governor DeSantis as my friend, and so, so I have that. I don't have to fight with him. So I just call him and give him a hard time, and he does the same. And so we didn't expand it all the way 20 years ago, frankly, because of our concerns over court decisions, state court decisions. That was what led us to do things incrementally. I think the key thing to do now is to reject the premise of the question. Because you know what? In Florida, we don't call them public schools anymore. See, public education, as described by Thomas Jefferson, was a vehicle to educate the public. It was a goal, not a method. I've now even gotten Democrats to call them government schools. So, because every school that educates a child is a school that's in the business of educating the public. And so, by the way, we are at the point in Florida where government schools are at risk. In my own school district, Florida's growing. You all are moving to Florida, 1,000 people a day. But my school district is small. My government school district is smaller today than it was 5 years ago. It's not because there's fewer students. in my county. It's because every parent who can is running for the exits, whether it's homeschool, public charter school, private school on their own, private school voucher. People are fleeing the system. So I no longer grant the premise. I'm okay. If 20 years from now we don't have government-run schools, we don't have government-run a lot of things. So I don't think we need to say this argument. It's our goal to have a strong government-run school system. That's not the goal. And I say this. The goal is to make sure every child is educated to live their dreams, because education is a gift from God. It's a gift from God. It is what defines America. It's not about where you start, it's about where you end. And education is the number one thing that can allow a poor kid from Kentucky, no offense to West Virginia, a poor kid from Kentucky to go to Harvard, start a company when he was 19, start 2 more, and retire when he was 40. That's my story, and none of it would have happened without education. I only do this job now because my wife told me either I find something else to do or she was going to find somewhere else to live. So that was part of how I became to be in the legislature. But that is it. Don't grant the premise of their arguments. Push back. Don't fight the fight on their playing field. Fight the fight on ours, because on ours we win.
Absolutely.
I have to say that in terms of the myths, there's several ones, and I want to make sure I hit on one of the most important ones that I had to overcome. So I homeschool, as you guys heard, and I have a lot of friends and supporters who also homeschool, and that's a growing movement, as Representative Fine said. And homeschoolers are scared of ESAs. They're scared of anything from the government. They want nothing from the government. And I had to make it clear, again, it's their choice, right? I had to make it clear that passing an ESA did not in any way force them to participate in the ESA, force the government onto them, and actually, in order to ensure that it was clear that passage of the ESA, which the Hope Scholarship does let you homeschool children. It does let you use those funds for homeschooling. Did not affect the homeschoolers at all. We actually defined it in the law, a different category for those who accept Hope Scholarship funds. So if you accept Hope Scholarships, if you enroll as a Hope Scholarship recipient, you are known as a Hope Scholarship student. You are not a homeschool student. So even though you can use those funds to teach your child at home in an individualized instruction, you are, by the state of West Virginia, you are not defined as a homeschooler because you're accepting government money, and I thought that that was fair. And there is slightly different regulations for those Hope Scholarship students who want to educate at home. There's a little bit more, required of them, which again, I think is fair. If you are accepting tax dollars from your state, we should have oversight to make certain you're using it appropriately. I did not have a problem with that. So we did that, and that was one of the number one things I had to overcome, because when we first tried to pass ESAs, homeschoolers were like, oh, no way. No, we don't want anything to do. And it's like, I know. I'm not messing with you. I'm not taking it myself. Second big myth that we had to overcome was, again, you guys have heard it how many times, we're defunding the public schools. The public schools will not survive if you allow the money to follow the students. Well, yeah, I know.
So what?
I can't exactly say that, and especially in West Virginia, which is like 80% rural, and most of the citizens are happy with the public schools. I mean, I will tell you right now, I will be very surprised if we ever get more than 5% participation in the Hope Scholarship. The vast majority of people are happy. We have rural schools. They tend to be very community-centered. We're not seeing a lot of the radical stuff that some other states suffer from yet. I know it's coming. I'm not at all naive like that. But the point is, they're happy with their schools. I'm not going to sell it saying, I want the public schools defunded, But the reality is, and this is what I would say to the legislators who would use that, and of course the unions and all of those who are like, oh, you're defunding the public schools. If you guys are doing a good job, you have nothing to be afraid of. No one is going to leave the public school system where they're thriving. No one. I mean, so it's up to you guys to keep them there. And actually, because we in the Hope Scholarship require them to be enrolled in public school in order to apply for the Hope Scholarship, except for incoming kindergartners, that you have to be enrolled in public school. I'm actually incentivizing people who are homeschooling and private schooling, who might want to have Hope Scholarship recipient, to enroll in public school. They have to do that in order to be able to apply for the Hope Scholarship. And I told the public schools, here's your chance. Go ahead. Try to sell what a great system you have to them. Yeah, we'll see how well that works.
We'll see. So before we get to their questions, and I do want to make sure we leave plenty of time for them to ask you all questions, the last one I have is that after this, Laura is going to talk a little bit about lobbying your legislators and what that looks like. So with a couple minutes each, how would you suggest, or tips or tricks when they're going into the State House, when they're lobbying their legislators as parents, what are some things that they need to keep front of mind to create these changes that you guys are also advocating for?
And so I can speak to Florida. Every state's different. So to give you a context, I represent 170,000 people. That's how many people are in my district. And I have 2 aides, 2 full-time employees. I actually have multiple offices. Some legislators, I remember meeting with the appropriations chair of another state who literally had nothing other than a desk on the floor of his chamber. So every state is different. So I'll tell you what works for me with that as a context. I rank these for people. Social media, doesn't work. Write a Facebook comment on somebody's page, Email doesn't work because we get so many of them and they're all computer generated. Phone calls, you actually have to pick up the phone and make some effort. Then you start to get on the radar screen. And by far the best way is to ask for an in-person meeting. I have found, at least in Florida, that most legislators are pretty accessible, particularly to people in our district and or our county. I'll tell anybody, I'll meet with anybody once. Twice, depends on how you behave in the first meeting. But and by the way, that's really how they behave. I have conservatives I won't meet with a second time. It's not really their political views. And I have people who don't agree with me on anything, but they're respectful about it. They come see me all the time. So it's about how you comport yourself, not necessarily your political views. The other thing is go to the Capitol. Now, for us, that's hard. We're a big state. Tallahassee's a long way from anybody. But the people who show up and ask for meetings in Tallahassee do very well. At least in Florida, the people who show up to testify expecting to change the outcome of a vote are often disappointed because we generally know how we're going to vote on a bill before we walk into the room. But I would say the number one thing you can do if you want to lobby is ask for meetings, be respectful, whether you agree with them or not, and stories. Stories work. That's the reason, instead of telling you about my bill up front, I told you my story. Stories work, and that's what my reputation is in the Florida legislature. Everyone always listens when I talk because they know I'm going to tell a story. Some of them are true, but no, they're all true. So storytelling, we heard from the woman from Ohio. She told the story of her son. Tell stories.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off that, and hopefully I'll be able to piggyback off what Senator Rucker says. But I put a phone call into Representative Fine's office, and 48 hours later, I had a confirmed meeting with him, and we brought some parents and talked to him in person. And within 48 hours, his staff had confirmed, yes, we'll get you the meeting, we'll get you the time once we know the voting schedule. So it absolutely worked within 2 days. So Senator Rucker, tell us what tips you have.
Well, just to compare, West Virginia is a very small state. As a state senator, I have 169,000 voters. Our representatives have 18,000, like huge difference. But we're a very small state, so I do not have all that staff. I have an office, and when I was education chair, I was given an assistant and a lawyer. That's it. Those who are not chair of major committees just have an office. So we answer our own emails, usually answer our own phone calls until I have, my assistant now. But we do respond to those. I will say, at least for me, like the emails work as well as the in-person meetings. One of the most effective things you can do is follow up. Do not just expect, okay, I'm going to call or I'm going to email and leave the one message and think I'm good. It really is important to follow up. Very often, we don't totally get everything you said. I can't tell you how many people will leave a message or send an email and not put a contact so I can call them back. It's like, anyways. But in terms of showing up in person, anything that rises to the top is when it's personal. Like you said, stories definitely help. And if you actually do enough research so that you make it easy for me. So if you live in a rural state like West Virginia where they might not have all that staff, and you want something, and you say, listen, what I'm looking for has been done by the state of Florida, this is their bill number, this is what they did in their bill, I'm looking for something like that in West Virginia, that already saves me like a good hour of research, because if you just send, I want to do this, and I have to totally draft it from scratch, that's going to take time, you know? Another thing, organize. So this is what the teachers' unions have learned. This is why they've been so effective. Whenever, and especially when it comes to education, whenever an education bill comes, I know I'm going to hear from them. They're going to have paid lobbyists, they're going to have paid researchers, and they will be at your door, they will be emailing, they'll be phone calling. They're organized. They let all the teachers know, all of their members, hey, you need to, lobby against this bill, lobby for this bill. But the parents are not that organized. But one of the most crucial things, and I, as a grassroots organizer like yourself, I organize my own groups, as I've said. But one of the most effective things you can do is organize as parents. Have your county organize a parents group, concerned parents of, Monongalia County or Jefferson County or whatever. And so you can send out an email to them or message them and say, hey, this bill's coming up, we need to lobby for it. We need to call and email senator and representative, but get organized. It doesn't mean that you have to be like the unions. I certainly do not expect you to take their methods up, but the organization really does work for you to get the word out, for you to educate them as to what's going on, because I know all of you are busy. You have kids, you're raising them, and for us, if we get 100 calls on a bill, like that moves us. That moves the legislators. They're like, oh my goodness, this is a big deal.
Absolutely. And what I want to point out here is that we have several people in the room aside from these two individuals. So, for example, Bill, what did you do in Colorado?
16-year legislator, former president.
So that's the resource that you should be talking to as well if you're in Colorado. Erica Donalds is here. Erica Donalds has extensive experience. Tara Myers, obviously in Ohio, has been involved, and that is just scratching the surface. Several of you are extremely involved. Rhonda Thomas is here. And again, I'm just scratching the surface. Most of you, so use each other as this resource to help organize. Bill and I have been playing phone tag to try to get some things to happen in Colorado because I understand the value of what he offers, and you all have something very similar. And the other thing that I would say is that they both never mentioned having to understand the technicalities of the bill to lobby for it, right? That's why I lobby. If they want to talk about the technicalities, they can talk to somebody from Heritage, they can talk to some school choice expert. They do not expect or need that from you. That's part of my job. That's why you come in with the stories, and don't be afraid to make a public comment or testimony or have a meeting when you don't understand all of the clauses in the bill. You should understand the bill and what you're advocating for, but if you have not dissected every part of the bill, you're okay. They're looking for the story. That's why I lobby. So that is not the role that needs to be filled.
The legislators probably don't know the technicalities of the bill.
So with that in mind, I know we have a pretty tight schedule this afternoon, but I do want to take some time for questions, and we'll try to be as brief as we can in the questions and the answers so we can get to 4 or 5, hopefully. All right, Zach.
30 seconds or less.
Right? Fire drills here.
I'm a huge proponent of school choice, having brought my own children up through all the different possible ways, and I am a brand new person running for school board, and so I'm curious how you address that in a kind of touchy way, brand new, where they realize you're not trying to eliminate maybe the government schools, but not impede on that with school choice, being a strong proponent myself.
I have friends that I just helped get elected onto the school board, and I told them, don't make that like the number one thing on your campaign trail. Obviously, if you're running for the school board, it's because you care about the public schools and you want them to be better. Make that your focus. Make certain that every single time you speak about what you want to do, it's student-centered, because that right there is the key, and it seems so simple and so basic. I mean, the unions have these signs saying kids first, but they advocate for things that doesn't put the kids first at all. They're at the very, very bottom. But you can absolutely advocate for kids first, for the students first. And that essentially means you would be open to, of course, whatever is best for that student in whatever, like he liked to say, any modality, any scenario, any way, they need to get a good education, and that's your focus. And when it comes to, like my friend, who, again, is now fortunately on the school board, I'm very excited for her, but I told her, I said, you know, be ready with at least 1 or 2 key things you would change. Because folks do expect you to, you know, what is it you're going to do that's going to be different? And I think that made the difference between her and other candidates who just said, well, I just like our public schools and I want them to do better. Have something concrete. And she got her information from attending school board meetings and paying and listening attention to what was going on. And she knew in her heart, like, we need to change this and this. So that she made that the focus of her campaign. You don't need to promise the world. You don't have to say, oh, all of a sudden we're going to pay our teachers a lot more and we're going to reduce the class sizes. People understand that that's not easy to do, but focus on 1 or 2 things.
You know, I would say we're in a unique time. I think people have generally had it with government-run schools, most parents. That's why we see Glenn Youngkin winning in Virginia and some of these other elections. In Brevard County, our school district is collapsing, not because of school choice. It's because of the policies they're adopting. You know, we're going to force critical race theory on you. We're going to let boys play girls' sports. We're going to let you decide what you are. We're going to not respect parents' rights. I could go on and on and on. We're going to force mask, despite Governor DeSantis and the law that we passed. That's why people are leaving. And so I tell the people running for school board in the state of Florida, say, I'm going to improve the product so that people want to go to our schools. And that's why they're leaving. The schools are forcing them out. I don't want my kid to wear a mask. Fine, I'm taking them out. I don't want my kid to be told they're responsible for the Holocaust because they have a German last name. I don't want any of this. And so stop these things, focus on education, and kids will come back. That'd be the message that we're doing. They're rejecting because of the policies the school board is making. It's typically not teachers doing these things. It's the elected officials that are making them. Say, I'm going to change them, people will come back.
Hi, my question is for funding for vouchers and so forth. I understand and everything that I'm learning, and I'm new to this, but I'm trying to get, just to diminish the confusion for, if we have vouchers, would we not be accepting government funds? In what way can we determine, because I know if those funds are government funds, they're going to have strings attached. Then whoever's teaching is going to have to reach those requirements in order to continue funding. So how do I differentiate and tell parents, because in Texas, we have a ton of parents who want to take these kids out of schools, but they don't want government funds. And besides thinking of who's going to privatize and who's going to help raise funds for private schooling or for vouchers, what's the how do we differentiate the government funds from vouchers and so forth?
Well, so the tax credit scholarship, which Representative Fine was talking about, is not government funds. That's private individuals putting money into an account and it following that student and whatever, requirements they put on there. But that's not government funds. But the ESA, Education Savings Account, that I was talking about is government funds. It is the state funding, and it's only the state funding. So we don't touch the local funding. It's only the state funding, and it follows the student to where they go. And yes, it does have strings attached. Now, of course, I advocated to have as few as possible and only those that are reasonable. And there is not a single person I know who has accepted the Host Scholarship that is worried about any of the requirements. They're very common sense requirements. It has to be spent on education, but it can be any education product. We made certain to protect the education service providers that just because they're accepting Hope Scholarship, we still can't tell them how to run their school, how to run their... Can they choose curriculum? So the Hope Scholarship recipients, yes, whatever curriculum they prefer, but the curriculum has to follow the rules that we establish, which, again, very common sense. So at least that's the way ours is, I'm sure.
Ours isn't like that. We have very few rules. You get a voucher to go to a private school. We don't want to be in the business of telling private schools how to operate themselves. So no, they don't have to abide by the State Board of Education rules.
Well, ours don't either.
Yeah. You just say you can have the money and give it to a school.
The way you write the legislation is very important. So, like it says, those who accept this money, it doesn't tie them to following any of the rules that you have for Board of Education or for private schools. They're just accepting the Hope Scholarship money to use for that child's education.
It's the same thing as if the parent was writing a check of their own.
Right.
Instead of I'm writing the check, I'm getting the money, I sent the government back, and it's the check. That's how ours work. Yeah.
Yeah. And a really important distinction that Senator Rucker made early on was that you still have the choice not to take the money, period. And by the way, your state potentially has rules for homeschoolers regardless of whether they take the money anyways. My family homeschools in Colorado. There's not a lot of rules, but there are rules anyways to homeschool your kids in Colorado. Zach, we better get to the next question.
Hi, I'm Kerwin Franklin. I'm from Arizona, and we are battling the teachers' unions. The school districts are spending money on lobbyists, $250,000, against parental rights bills, transparencies, the transgender and sports bill. And then also, now the schools are working together, and they have another union or coalition or the North Valley, and they're spending money on lobbyists to lobby against parents. So we've thought about, how do we have a bigger voice? Would it be effective at all to form a parents' union and hire a lobbyist ourselves? A lot of us are busy or we have young kids and they can't always go down to the Capitol. We do take time off work and try to make it there, but it's hard as individual parents to fight this.
I think we realize when it's grassroots versus organized. And just because they have lobbyists, so 12 school districts in the state of Florida violated our law last year and we passed a parental bill of rights that said you couldn't do medical procedures on kids without parents' permission, and 12 of them went, puh, we're going to do mask mandates anyway. Now, I set their budgets, and guess what I did? I say, you're one of the dirty dozen, you ain't coming in my office. So, I think you've got to have elected officials who are willing to fight, and at least in Florida, I believe parents are looking for fighters. It is not today is not the same as it was 5 years ago. People are angry about all of this stuff. It's why school board meetings have become angry. Tap into that anger because we're on the winning side.
And I was going to say, if I know that you're a school district and you have spent money for a lobbyist, don't you dare come to me and tell me you need more money or that you're scared of losing funding, because I'm going to just...
I did that on CRT. My school district, we're broke. In the middle of COVID, they spent $200,000 on a director of critical race theory. I'm the first K-12 appropriations chair in Florida history that cut his school district's budget. So,
And Kerwin, let's connect you with Marissa Hamilton, our director of grassroots, started a group called Easy AZ, and they basically, the whole model was to get parents that live close to the Capitol that are aligned and make lobbying as easy as they call it easy because they want it to be 15 minutes and you can testify. The first step was to get you aware. The second step was to testify. Then the third is to start to have meetings. And now they just have a revolving door constantly of parents in there. So that takes time, but you can build just a constant stream of parents there. And I think we have time for one more.
Awesome. So I appreciate that you changed the homeschooler designation in the Hope Scholarship. My question is, if parents who do that take the money and then, for instance, get a homeschool curriculum, would the regulations then be able to come in at all to the homeschool curriculum? Because I know, for instance, in the bill that was ran in our state, Utah, which was another one called the Hope Scholarship. I don't know how, similar to your legislation.
I'll borrow from Florida.
Right. So it has an accept clause, like you said, that was protecting supposedly the private schools, but there was an accept clause in there as well saying that they could require normative assessments from the Utah State Board of Ed. So I'm just wondering how you're writing your bills to maybe get around some of those requirements.
So every state is different, so I can't say exactly why or how it would be done in your state. But for us, if you are a Hope Scholarship recipient, you are a Hope Scholarship recipient that has to follow the Hope Scholarship law that I passed, and none of the other laws apply to you. So what the homeschoolers do not apply to Hope Scholarship. What the Hope Scholarship doesn't apply to homeschoolers. And same with private schoolers. They're a separate category. They have different regulations. And we did the same. This year we passed micro school and learning pods, and they have zero regulations. They're completely free, but they're separate. They're not considered private schools. So we just differentiated in our law to make certain that it doesn't get mixed in together. And then if you are using a curriculum, it doesn't matter what curriculum it is, you could even, as a homeschooler, use a public school curriculum. That doesn't mean that you're public schooling your child. You're still homeschooling.
In Florida, when I do the bill I described, what the restrictions will be what you can spend the money on. So, for example, you can't go and take a vacation or something like that. It'll be filtering for fraud, that sort of thing. So there might be 30 curriculums you can buy. You pick it, have a good time. But so that sort of thing. It'll be looking for financial fraud. We're not going to control how because we're not going to say taking this money is different from homeschooling. I don't like the fact that homeschool parents have to pay twice. They got to pay for taxes. We're going to give them their money back and keep doing what you're doing. Just do it with our nickel. But let me close with this. I want you to understand. I'm going to tell one more story, and then we're going to wrap up. When I got angry about what my other son was learning in first grade, he was told 9 + 6 didn't equal 15 because he didn't do Common Core. I went and I met with the principal of the school. He told me, I have 2 degrees from Harvard, but I didn't understand math. So I called the area superintendent, and I walked him through why this was crazy. And the area superintendent told me to my face that I wasn't qualified to have an opinion about my son's education because I don't have a degree in academic administration like he does. And then he told me, well, you may be right, but we can't make a habit out of doing things because parents tell us to. A couple years later, after I got elected, that guy got promoted to superintendent of schools in my whole school district. So the first thing I did when I became chairman of the committee is I invited him to come. And I wouldn't tell him what I was going to ask him. So he comes with all these notebooks and binders and papers. He's ready. He's got charts and graphs. He sits down. I say, I only have one question. Am I qualified to have an opinion about my child's education now?
Which binder was that in? The answer.
That's right. We're right. That's what I say. We're right. Go on offense. Go on offense. Don't fight on their playing field. Don't subscribe to their assumptions. Go and fight because we are right and parents are with us. This is going to be the year of the parent. And so get out there and just make it happen because we will.
Awesome. Outstanding. Well, I feel fortunate to have both of you here. The very first time I was introduced to Senator Rucker is Corey DeAngelis pulled me aside and said, Josiah, I want to introduce you to a great American hero who would empower children. And the first time I met Representative Fine, Laura had said, here's a hell of a fighter. Basically is what she had said. And then we walked into his office. And I think the first thing you said is, I'm sold, I'm with you, how can we do it together? He didn't let us say a word. He just said, I'm with you, let's do it together. What's the next step? So I want to thank both of you so much for being with us here today.